All right, so today we are going deep on feminist sociology.
Ooh.
We got this really interesting article.
Okay.
It's by Joe Rager, who's a sociology professor, and it's published in Politics and Rights Review.
Nice. Sounds heavy.
It is, but it's really fascinating stuff.
I'm intrigued.
So basically, this deep dive is all about why studying gender is actually causing, like, a global uproar.
Wow. Okay, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so, like, picture this. It's the 1970s. The U.S. women's movement is in full swing.
Okay.
And feminist sociology, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It
Yeah.
grew directly from the real struggles that women were facing.
Oh, absolutely. And Rager does such a good job of setting the scene, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about it. In the 70s, marital rape wasn't even legally recognized,
Oh,
and women recording assault. Forget about it.
yeah.
They were just dismissed, their experiences totally minimized, or just straight up denied.
It's crazy how recently that was.
I know. And there's this one part in the article that is just, well, it's chilling, honestly. Rager talks about how women were sometimes asked how many times they orgasmed during an assault when filing police reports.
Oh my God, that's just,
I know, right?
it's horrible.
It's just awful, but it really highlights how deeply entrenched these power imbalances were.
Yeah, for sure. So how did feminist sociology even begin to push back against this?
Well, some early feminist sociologists like Vicky Rose, Pauline Bart, and Richard Gels, they did some really important work.
Like what?
Well, they interviewed women, documented their experiences with rape and domestic violence,
Okay.
and really challenged those prevailing myths that just kept women silent.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about giving women a voice, you know?
Right.
It was about questioning this whole idea that men's experiences were the universal standard.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where Jesse Bernard's work comes in, right?
Exactly.
That whole idea
Absolutely.
that traditional sociology was basically just the science of male society,
Yeah.
which is a pretty bold statement.
Totally. And Rager brings up the Nebraska Feminist Collective, too,
Mm-hmm.
and their critique of this whole people-male problem in research.
Oh, yeah.
Which, when you think about it, it's kind of mind-blowing how much we might have missed or misinterpreted because of that bias.
It's like we've been looking at the world through this totally distorted lens the whole time,
Totally.
assuming that one perspective just represents everyone's reality.
Exactly. And so feminist sociology really sets out to change that lens.
So how did they even start to do that?
Well, they revolutionized not just what we study, but how we study it.
Okay.
I mean, scholars like Dorothy Smith and Patricia Hill Collins, they brought race and gender into the actual theoretical frameworks,
Okay.
acknowledging that, these factors, they profoundly shape our experiences. You can't ignore them.
Right.
And Sandra Harding, she argued for reflexivity and positionality,
Yep.
which is basically recognizing that a researcher's background, their own personal experiences, it inevitably influences their work.
So instead of pretending to be neutral, feminist sociology is saying, hey, we all have biases. Let's acknowledge that and make it a part of the process.
Exactly.
I like that.
And this whole commitment to transparency, it extended to ethics, too.
Uh-huh.
Like, feminist sociologists, they went beyond those standard, institutional review boards,
Yeah.
emphasizing power dynamics, especially the ones in research itself,
Okay.
and responsibility to the communities being studied.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just about gathering data,
Okay.
it was about making an actual difference in the real world.
That's cool. It seems like activism is a really core part of feminist sociology.
Yeah, for sure.
Rager talks about the challenges women face within academia itself, too.
Totally.
Discrimination, lack of support for families, limited career paths. It's kind of like that leaky pipeline we see in STEM fields.
100%.
Any movement that challenges the status quo, it's going to face pushback.
You got it.
And feminist sociology, I mean, just by its nature, it disrupts these deeply entrenched power structures.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how Rager frames this whole thing.
What do you mean?
Well, she says feminist sociology is both a product of this ongoing revolution, but also a driver of it.
So it's not just about studying the world, it's about changing it.
Exactly. But there's another layer here.
Hmm.
Rieger points out that a lot of early feminist sociology, while groundbreaking, it was mainly focused on the experiences of white, middle-class women.
So even within feminist sociology, there were limitations.
Right, but thankfully the field has, really evolved.
Yeah.
Since then, you have Black feminist scholars, Chicana feminists, indigenous scholars,
I see.
transnational feminists, queer theorists. They've all made feminist sociology so much richer.
So it's become more inclusive,
Definitely.
recognizing that women's experiences aren't all the same.
Exactly. And honestly, that evolution makes it even more, I don't know, threatening to those who benefit from how things are now.
Why is that?
Because, feminist sociology doesn't just challenge individual attitudes, it challenges the systems themselves.
Okay, so let's talk about the system.
Oh.
Rieger highlights 3 areas where feminist sociology has really made an impact.
Right.
The first one is the construction of the gender system. What does that even mean?
Well, for centuries, gender roles and expectations, they've been presented as like natural and inevitable.
Yeah.
But feminist sociology has shown us how gender isn't just biology.
Right.
It's a social construct.
Yeah.
And it shapes power dynamics, expectations, opportunities.
Yeah.
It's revealed how deep patriarchy is in our societies
Yeah.
and how it limits everyone, not just women.
Yeah?
It's like feminist sociology gave us this new language to understand something we all kind of felt but couldn't really articulate before.
Yeah.
We all know how gender roles play out in our lives.
Right.
But feminist sociology gives us the tools to analyze and critique those roles.
That makes sense. Okay, so what's the second area?
Well, the second one Rieger talks about is the creation of knowledge itself.
Okay.
Feminist sociology, it critiques the traditional ways of producing knowledge, which are often, let's be honest, male-dominated. It pushes for research that's more inclusive, reflexive, ethically grounded.
Right, so it's going back to that idea of positionality and reflexivity we talked about earlier.
Exactly, acknowledging that the researcher's own experiences and perspectives, they matter.
Right, they're not separate from the research.
Totally.
Okay, got it. So what's the third area Rieger talks about?
It's how we understand identity.
Okay.
Feminist sociology has shown us that our identities, they're not just singular and fixed.
Right.
They're fluid, they're intersectional, they're constantly evolving.
So it's giving us this more complex lens, right?
Yeah.
Instead of seeing people as just one thing, feminist sociology helps us understand how all these different social forces come together to shape who we are.
You got it. It's about recognizing the interplay of all these different forces and how they affect our lives.
Okay, so bringing it back to Rieger's article, it's kind of no wonder feminist sociology is under attack.
Right.
It's literally changing the way we understand the world and ourselves.
Right. It's a threat to people who are clinging to these outdated notions of power and hierarchy.
Yeah.
But that's exactly why it's so important.
Hmm.
Feminist sociology is not just some academic thing, it's a force for social change.
I like that.
And Rieger's message is pretty powerful.
What is it?
She says that revolution that was started by feminist sociology, it's not over.
Wow.
It's an ongoing process, and we all have a part to play.
So what does that look like in practice?
How can we actually be part of this revolution?
That's a great question. So we've talked about like the history and the impact of feminist sociology.
Yeah.
But how is all of this playing out in the real world?
That's the exciting part. Feminist sociology isn't stuck in these like academic journals.
Okay.
It's actually shaping social movements,
Right.
policy decisions, even our everyday interactions.
Wow. So give us some examples.
Okay, well, think about the hashtag #MeToo movement.
Okay.
It's a perfect example of how feminist sociology, especially those concepts of intersectionality and power dynamics, has become mainstream.
So you're saying the hashtag #MeToo movement was about more than just individual perpetrators.
Exactly. It exposed that whole culture of silence and victim blaming.
Right.
The kind of culture that allowed harassment and assault to just go on for, like, forever.
Yeah.
And feminist sociology has been so important in giving us the framework to understand all of that.
Oh, so.
Well, it's helped us see how gender intersects with race, with class, all these other social identities
Okay.
to create these vulnerabilities to harassment and exploitation.
I see.
So it's not just about a few bad guys, it's about systemic power imbalances.
Right. That need to be addressed.
Exactly.
So feminist sociology is helping us connect individual experiences to like these larger societal patterns.
Absolutely, and that's crucial if we want to make real change.
Okay, that makes sense. So beyond hashtag #MeToo, what are some other areas where feminist sociology is making a difference?
Well, what about the fight for reproductive rights?
Oh, yeah.
Feminist sociology has been key in like debunking myths and stereotypes about abortion. It's brought attention to the real lives of women and families
Right.
and advocated for policies that support reproductive justice.
So it's going beyond studying these issues. It's
Yeah.
about actually trying to drive social change.
Exactly. And this activism, it takes a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
Feminist sociologists are working with grassroots organizations, they're influencing legislation, they're doing research that impacts policy decisions,
Wow.
and educating the public, both through their writing and their teaching.
So it's really a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, exactly. And the effects, I mean, they reach far beyond academia.
How so?
Well, it's shaping how we understand gender roles,
Mhm.
family dynamics, workplace equality, healthcare, education. I mean, just about everything.
So it sounds like feminist sociology is really this force for progress that's working on all these different levels
You got it.
to try to make the world a more equitable place.
And while we still have a lot of work to do, I think the progress we've made is really undeniable. Feminist sociology has given us these tools to not just critique the world, but to actually try to change it.
That's pretty powerful. So as we wrap up this deep dive into feminist sociology, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of
I
this?
think the most important thing is to remember that feminist sociology isn't just some, obscure academic field.
Right.
It's a way of seeing the world. It's
Yeah.
a way of understanding how power works, and it's a call to action.
It's a revolution in progress, like Rader said,
Exactly.
and we can all be part of it.
Absolutely. By engaging with these ideas, by challenging our own assumptions, and by advocating for change, we can all help build a more just world for everyone.
So to our listeners out there, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop questioning the status quo. That's the legacy of feminist sociology.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.